Hello, if you could turn to page 6 of your packet, today what we're going to be doing is using long division to determine factors or to determine whether or not something is a factor of a given expression. Okay, so number 10, it says determine whether x plus 2 is a factor of p of x. And then it says justify your answer. Okay, so if x plus 2 is a factor of p of x, well, all that means is it should divide evenly into p of x, okay? Because if something is a factor, it divides evenly into the expression. So I'm going to do long division. Okay, so let's get started. So I'm going to look at my first term out here and my first term under here, and I'm going to say, what do I multiply x by to give me x to the fifth? Well, x to the fourth. So I'm going to put that on top of my division bar, and then I'm just going to distribute. So x to the fourth times x is x to the fifth, and x to the fourth times 2 is positive 2x to the fourth. Okay, so now we know we have to subtract. So I'm going to switch this to a negative and circle it to show I switched it, and switch this to a negative and circle that to show that's the term I'm using. All right, well, look what happens here. So actually, the first two terms cancel out, and the second two terms cancel out. So when that happens, see how we have two terms out here, right, the x and the 2? That means we need two terms down here. So instead of bringing down just the next term, we are going to bring down the next two terms. Okay, so I'm going to bring down the negative 3x cubed and the negative 6x squared. And let's start the process again. So we're going to look at the first term on the outside here and the first term down over here. And we want to say, what do I need to multiply x by to give me negative 3x cubed? We have to multiply it by a negative 3x squared. Okay, now I'm going to put that on top of this term. Okay, because technically we have no x cubed term. That's why there's a missing spot, that's why there's a space here. Okay, so let's distribute. So negative 3x squared times x would be negative 3 x cubed, so we're going to put that down here. And then negative 3x squared times 2 would be negative 6x squared. So we put the negative 6x squared. Okay, and now we know we need to subtract, so we're basically changing our signs. So this becomes a positive, and we circle it to show we changed it. And this becomes a positive, and we circle it to show we changed it. And look at the same thing happen again. Look, both of these cancel out, right? A negative 3x cubed cancels off with a positive 3x cubed. And a negative 6x squared cancels off with a positive 6x squared. So again, since we have two terms out here, we need to bring down two terms. Actually, when you bring down two terms, it goes faster, right? You have to do the long division process half as many times. Okay, so now start the process one last time. We have an x. And say to yourself, what do I need to multiply that x by to give me negative 6x? Well, just a negative 6. So I'm going to put that negative 6 right on top of this term. Okay, so negative 6 times x is negative 6x. And then negative 6 times 2 is negative 12. All right, then I'm going to switch my sign so this becomes a plus. And this becomes a plus, and then, look at that, everything cancels off. So, if everything cancels off, it means we have no remainder. So if we have no remainder, x plus 2 divided into p of x evenly. So if it divides into it evenly, it means that x plus 2 is a factor of the expression. Okay, so either one of these two explanations work, and this right here is your justification. This is your work that shows why. Okay, number 11 says to use long division to divide that given expression by x plus 2, and then they want to know, is x plus 2 a factor of that given expression? Explain why or why not. Okay, so let's do it. So long division. Let's look at the first term of the expression outside the division bar and the first term of the expression underneath the division bar. We want to say, what do I multiply this x by to give me x cubed? So that would be x squared. So I'm going to put that on top of my division bar. And now let's distribute. X squared times x is x to the third. And then x squared times 2 is 2x squared. Okay, so now we know we have to subtract, so I'm going to change my signs. So I'm going to make this a minus and circle it to show that I changed it. And I'm going to make this a minus and circle it to show that I changed it. And also, it helps us because since there's two signs here, right, we know we're using the circled one. Okay, so now our first two terms cancel off, and 7x squared plus, oh, I'm sorry, see, I circled that. 7x squared minus 2x squared would be 5x squared. Okay, and let's bring down the next term. Right, since we have two terms out here, we want to have two terms down here, that when we distribute, everything lines up. Okay, so let's start the process again. What do we multiply x by to give us 5x squared? 5x. So I'm going to put a positive plus 5x up here and then distribute. So 5x times x is 5x squared, and 5x times 2 is 10x, so positive 10x. And again, let's change our signs to show we're subtracting. So this becomes a minus, and this also becomes a minus. All right, so our first two terms, 5x squared and 5x squared cancel. I'm sorry, 5x squared minus 5x squared cancels. And then 14x minus 10x is 4x. And again, let's bring down this next term. Okay, so what do we multiply x by to give us 4x? Positive 4. So now when I distribute the 4 times x is 4x. And then 4 times 2 is 8. All right, and then we're going to change our signs. So this becomes a minus. This becomes a minus. And when I combine my like terms, right, these cancel. And 3 minus 8 is negative 5. So this negative 5 right here, this is our remainder. And if you recall, when we have a remainder, how we write it is we basically take our expression, and since this is a minus sign, we're going to subtract 5 over the expression we were dividing by, so x plus 2. So this, I'm going to box this off, this is our answer when we use long division. Okay, so that was the first part, use long division to divide. Now they want to know, is x plus 2 a factor of this expression? And then they want us to explain why or why not. Okay, so you could say one of two things. You could either say this first one right here. I'm going to just box them off separately. So the first one says, x plus 2 is not a factor of the expression because it does not divide evenly into it. Okay, so you could say that, or you can say this. X plus 2 is not a factor of the expression because there is a remainder. So either one of these two works.